of verdicts and findings imposing the death penalty, it is the order of this court. You shall suffer the death penalty for each of the 19 special circumstances found true. Said penalty be inflicted within the...
Richard Ramirez. Police called him the Night Stalker. For over a year, he broke into strangers' homes in the middle of the night with a gun, a knife, a hammer. He didn't care who they were, old, young, couples, children. He violated them. He killed them. Sometimes, he made others watch. At least 14 people dead. More than 20 others survived. But none ever escaped him. He left no motive, just a pentagram drawn in blood, and a silence so deep it still echoes. He was born in El Paso, Texas in 1960. His name was Richard Ramirez, but this is not a story of birth, it's a story of descent. From his earliest years, pain was normal. His father, a former policeman from Mexico, ruled the house with a belt in one hand and a curse in the other. Screaming, beating, night after night. When the yelling got too loud, Richard would slip away, to the cemetery alone. That was where he felt safe. By age 2, tragedy struck. A dresser toppled over and crushed his head. He went unconscious. Doctors said he'd be fine. But something had changed. Then, at 5, another blow. A steel swing smashed into his forehead. Blood poured down his face. No one took him to the hospital. 2 head traumas, 2 wounds to the very part of the brain that controls impulse and aggression. And then came the cousin. Miguel Ramirez, Vietnam veteran, killer. To Richard, he was a war hero. To anyone else, he was deranged. Miguel showed Richard photos, not of medals, but of mutilated women. Stripped, tied, shot, some beheaded. He bragged about how he had attacked them before killing them. He laughed, and Richard laughed with him. He was 13. Miguel taught him how to stay low in the shadows, how to move without sound, how to become invisible.
Miguel said fear is power, and once they're afraid of you, they belong to you.
And then, the moment that shattered what little humanity Richard had left. One afternoon, Miguel was fighting with his wife. They were yelling in the kitchen. Richard sat on the couch, and without warning, Miguel pulled out a revolver and shot his wife point blank in the face. Her head snapped back. She collapsed to the floor. Blood splattered across the kitchen tiles. Richard didn't scream, didn't cry. He just sat there watching, then smiled. After that day, Richard changed. He stopped speaking at school. He failed every class. He started sleeping during the day and walking the streets at night. He became obsessed with Satanism. Skulls, black candles. He memorized verses from the satanic Bible. He told a friend, "I don't need a God. I need control." And then he began practicing. He'd sneak into homes, not to steal, not yet. He just wanted to be inside, to feel what it was like to stand next to a sleeping stranger. One night, he crept through an unlocked back door. Inside, a woman was asleep on the couch. He stood there, in the dark, and watched her breathe. 40 minutes passed. Then he left, without touching a thing. This wasn't a game, it was a rehearsal. By 15, Richard had been arrested for theft. By 16, he was taking LSD, watching slasher films and reading about Ted Bundy. He didn't want attention. He wanted power. And pain was the currency. He told a classmate.
When you see fear in their eyes, that's when you know you're alive. Yeah.
And the classmate laughed. But Richard didn't. He meant every word. He was no longer just a troubled teen. He was becoming something else. Something that couldn't be undone. His next move wouldn't be rehearsal. It would be real. The Night Stalker. was almost ready to strike. Los Angeles, early 1980s. The city was loud, hot, alive. But someone was moving through its shadows, quiet, barefoot, and invisible. Richard Ramirez had arrived. He started with theft, breaking into homes, stealing jewelry, electronics, cash, anything he could sell for drugs. But money was never the real goal. He didn't break in to get rich. He broke in to stand above sleeping strangers, to watch, to feel control. Most nights, he wouldn't take much, just stood in dark corners, breathing slowly, barely blinking. He became obsessed with watching women undress through windows, balconies, bathrooms, living rooms. Nothing was off limits. If the curtains were cracked open, he was there. But watching wasn't enough. April 10th, 1984. Tenderloin District, San Francisco. 9-year-old Mei Loon was playing near a laundry room in the basement of her apartment building. Her parents were just upstairs. Richard was there too. He approached her calmly, offered her something, then led her to a dark corner of the building. No one saw them leave. Inside that basement, he did the unthinkable. He attacked her, strangled her, and when she stopped breathing, he threw her body down a water shaft. When police found her hours later, they had no leads, no suspect, no camera, no trace. The case went cold. For 25 years. In 2009, DNA finally told the truth. The killer was Richard Ramirez. But he didn't stop. He had tasted what it felt like to hold a life in his hands. And he wanted more. June 28, 1984. Just a few months later, downtown Los Angeles. Jenny Vinkow, 79 years old, lived alone in a small apartment. She was sweet, quiet, deeply religious. She kept her windows open at night to let the breeze in. That night, someone climbed through. He didn't make a sound, didn't wake her. He stabbed her repeatedly. Neck, chest, stomach. He slashed her throat so deeply. Her head was nearly severed from her body. Blood soaked the sheets, it spattered the walls, and when he was done, he ransacked the apartment, but left valuables behind. He wasn't there for things, he was there for her. The next morning, Jenny's mother came to visit. She had the keys. She let herself in.
Jenny?
Silence. She walked down the hallway, stopped at the bedroom door, turned the knob. Ick out. She screamed. Jenny lay on the bed, eyes open, neck slashed, face frozen in terror. Police arrived minutes later. One officer later said, "It wasn't a robbery. It wasn't rage. It was something else. Something colder." They dusted for prints, found nothing. There was no sign of forced entry, no suspects, no clues, just a dead woman in a city full of strangers. For almost a year, he disappeared again. No known killings, no signs of life. But behind the silence, he was growing bolder, sharper, hungrier. March 17th, 1985, Los Angeles. He returned. Late that night, Maria Hernandez pulled into her garage. Before she could close the door, Ramirez slipped in behind her. She turned and stared into the barrel of a .22 caliber handgun. She raised her hands. Instinct. She fell to the ground, but the bullet hit her keys. She survived. Ramirez thought she was dead. He walked past her and into the house. Inside was her roommate, Dale Okazaki. She heard the shot. She ducked behind the kitchen counter, held her breath. He walked in, waited. Then she peeked. 1 second. One mistake. She was shot in the forehead. Outside, Maria Hernandez got up, ran, but not away. She circled around, hid behind a wall, and watched him walk out calmly, like nothing happened. She memorized his face. For the first time, someone had survived. That same night, just an hour later, another woman, Veronica Yu, was driving through Monterey Park. Ramirez saw her, pulled up beside her car, and without a word, he shot out the window, dead instantly. 3 women, 2 dead, 1 survived, in one night. The press panicked, the public snapped awake. And for the first time, the LAPD realized this wasn't just a spree. It was a pattern. He didn't know his victims. He didn't care about race, age, gender. He didn't steal much, and he used a different weapon every time. There was no logic, no motive, only destruction. They called him the Valley Intruder, but it wouldn't last. Soon, the world would know him by another name. Jenny was the first, but she would not be the last. And next time, he wouldn't wait for the night. By the time they found Jenny Vincow, the monster had already moved on. To another house, another victim. And this time, he wouldn't stop at one. Between March and July 1985, Southern California became a hunting ground. And Richard Ramirez hunted without rules. He didn't choose based on age, or gender, or wealth. He didn't care if you were a man, woman, child, or elderly. He killed whoever was there, whoever was unlucky enough to be behind that next door. His youngest known victim? A 6-year-old girl. His oldest? An 83-year-old woman. He used whatever he had, a gun, a knife, a hammer, a tire iron, or his bare hands. Sometimes he shot victims in their sleep. Sometimes he tied them up and mutilated them while they begged. Sometimes he just watched them die. There was no pattern, no motive, no mercy. And then, things got worse. He began leaving behind pentagrams, drawn in blood, on walls, mirrors, and even on the bodies. He carved satanic messages, made victims swear loyalty to the devil, whispered curses in their ears as he assaulted them. Survivors said he'd lean in so close they could smell the rot in his breath. He'd tell them their soul belonged to Satan, and that no prayer could save them now. Some were handcuffed, others gagged and beaten. Many were left half dead, crawling for help they'd never reach. Those who lived never truly escaped. They carried him in their dreams, in their scars, in every creak of the floor at night. She was 22, home alone, the city already on edge. But no one thought he'd come for them. She heard the window slide open. Then, a shadow moving through the hallway. Before she could scream, he was on her, tied her up, dragged her to the floor, and then a cold blade pressed against her throat. His voice, a whisper right beside her ear.
Swear to Satan?
She froze, and then, a miracle. A child, her baby brother, in the next room began to cry. Ramirez stopped. He looked at her, not angry, just curious. Then he stood and walked away. She lived, but never again without terror. Police were already tracking dozens of murder cases. They knew some were connected, but how? Each crime was in a different area, different time, different weapon. He left no fingerprints, no DNA, and no logic. They were chasing a ghost, one detective said.
It's like we're blindfolded trying to stop lightning.
Ramirez wasn't a traditional serial killer. He didn't escalate gradually. He exploded, from theft to rape to murder in months, and then repeated the cycle, faster, louder, bloodier. Ramirez read the headlines. He kept newspaper clippings of his own crimes. He bragged to himself in the mirror. He called himself the Night Prowler. But soon the media would give him a better name, the Night Stalker. People began bolting their windows, sleeping with baseball bats and butcher knives under the pillow. LA had become a city under siege. Stores ran out of security alarms. Gun sales spiked. Neighbors whispered his name like a curse. He was no longer just a killer. He was a myth, a shadow, a nightmare without a face. It was 3 a.m. Ramirez entered through the back door. The husband shot first, execution style. The wife, barely alive, was dragged by the hair, assaulted, and left unconscious. Ramirez took what he wanted, food, jewelry, and then just walked out. But he didn't know. She survived, and later she talked, described the face, the voice, the eyes. Black, cold, empty. By now, Ramirez had killed over a dozen people. Some sources say 14, others say it could have been over 20. And every few days, another body, another house, another bloody pentagram. The Night Stalker didn't care that police were watching. He didn't care the city was afraid. In fact, he liked it. He wanted the world to know there is no safety, there is no pattern, there is only me. A woman returns home, finds the back door ajar, lights flickering. She walks through the living room, blood on the floor, a trail leading to the bedroom. She pushes the door. Her mother's body, slashed, eyes wide, mouth open mid-scream, but Ramirez was gone. He was already on the freeway, laughing. In the midst of it all, one thing became clear. He wasn't trying to get away. He was playing with them, daring them to catch him. And still, no one could. Until a clue, a single footprint, a survivor's memory, a car, a fingerprint. But that's the next part of the story. They called him a shadow, but shadows don't leave blood on the walls. By the summer of 1985, Los Angeles wasn't just hot. It was boiling with dread. No one knew who he'd strike next. There was no pattern, no target, no curfew to help you feel safe. You could be 6 or 60, married or single, asleep or awake. He came when he wanted and left death behind. They started calling him the Night Stalker, and the name spread like gasoline on fire. Even streetlights felt useless. Even watchdogs whimpered. People began sleeping with baseball bats under their pillows. Some taped knives behind headboards. Others just didn't sleep. In East Los Angeles, one neighborhood tried to fight back. Residents formed an armed community patrol. They promised each other protection. They were tired of waiting for police. But on the very first night it happened. One of the men, just 32, was found the next morning, face down in a pool of blood. A slash across the chest, a broken jaw, a pentagram on the floor beside him. Nobody said justice again after that. The patrol disbanded. Doors locked tighter. Curtains never opened. Fear had won. Men. March 17, 1985. Maria Hernandez had just parked her car. She walked toward her condo door, unaware of the shadow behind her. Suddenly, metal clinked. She turned. The muzzle flashed. The blast exploded in her ears, but fate interfered. The bullet ricocheted off her keychain. Her hands flew up. Her body collapsed. She was still alive. And when she looked up, she saw his face. He stood still, confused, then fled. Maria would later describe every detail: the rotten teeth, the greasy hair, the wild eyes. She gave the police more than a sketch. She gave them a face. Her roommate wasn't so lucky. Dale Okazaki had poked her head out from behind the kitchen counter, only to meet the second bullet. Ramirez didn't speak, didn't search. He just walked out like it was nothing. Maria survived. But what she remembered most wasn't the gunshot. It was how quiet he was. How cold. 2 days later, in Monterey Park, an elderly couple was found slaughtered in their bedroom. Nothing stolen, nothing touched, except for one thing: a bloody footprint leading out the front door. It was from a rare Avia sneaker, size 11. Only a few hundred had been sold in California. Detectives Frank Salerno and Gil Carrillo latched onto it. They compared it to previous scenes, and it matched. This was the first time someone had physically linked the killings. But then, Ramirez vanished for 2 weeks. When he came back, he wore different shoes. That silence, it wasn't absence, it was strategy. The moment police began quietly talking about the Avia print, Ramirez changed his footwear. He was watching the news, listening to whispers. He wasn't just a killer, he was adapting. And still, he kept killing. Late one afternoon, a 15-year-old boy was walking home from school when a car pulled up beside him. Orange Toyota. Rusted. Loud engine. The door flew open. Ramirez jumped out, grabbed him by the arm, and shoved him into the back seat. The boy screamed. Taver. Coincidentally, a patrol car was parked nearby. The officers heard the scream, saw the orange blur speed away. Chase initiated. Inside the car, the teen kicked and punched. Ramirez snarled, "Shut up or die." The police were gaining. Ramirez swerved into alleys, trying to lose them. The boy, barely conscious, kicked the door with both feet. He hurled himself out, rolling onto the pavement at nearly 40 kilometers per hour. A miracle. No bones broken. Still breathing. Ramirez disappeared again. But now the police had a lead. Orange Toyota, missing front license plate, smelled of sweat and rust. Mondon. A few days later, officers found an orange Toyota abandoned at a gas station off the freeway. Inside, streaks of blood on the door. A smeared pentagram on the dashboard, and one clear, undeniable clue: a fingerprint. The print matched someone in the database. Richard Ramirez, 26 years old. Criminal record for car theft, drug possession, burglary. Finally, a name and a face. Shit. Detectives stared at the mugshot. The man in the photo looked almost bored. Dead eyes, crooked grin. But it was him. The Night Stalker wasn't a ghost anymore. He was flesh and blood, and the hunt was on. The LAPD went public. Ramirez's photo exploded across the state. Newspapers, TV, radio, all channels carried his face. Wanted for murder, armed and extremely dangerous. The city shifted from fear to obsession. Citizens reported strangers. People bought guns. Every man with black hair and sunken cheeks was looked at twice. Ramirez became a legend, a walking nightmare. But he wasn't done yet. This one, Ramirez saw the newspapers. He saw his face staring back. And instead of fleeing further, he returned to Los Angeles, the place where he had spilled so much blood. No, he once hunted in the dark. Now the city was waiting, and this time he wouldn't disappear. A ray. The last second. August 30th, 1985. The man who had hunted in the dark for over a year was about to face the light. Richard Ramirez stepped off a Greyhound bus into the East LA neighborhood of Boyle Heights. He had no idea that just hours earlier, his face had been broadcast on every television screen in California. His mugshot, pale sunken cheeks, that unmistakable dead stare, was now burned into the minds of millions. He walked into a corner store to buy snacks. As he approached the counter, the clerk froze. His eyes widened, lips trembled. Then, he looked down at the newspaper beside the register. It was him. The clerk whispered something in Spanish, then darted into the back. Ramirez saw it. He saw the fear and recognition. He dropped his snacks and fled. He ran out into the sunlight, weaving through traffic, his heart now pounding. People on the sidewalks stared. A woman pointed. A man yelled. Doors slammed. One voice rang out louder than all. El asesino. That was all it took. Ramirez broke into a sprint. His long, black hair whipped behind him as he ran down Whittier Boulevard. But this time, he wasn't the hunter. Now, the city was hunting him. A man chased after him with a crowbar. Others joined, a spontaneous mob swelling with every block. Some had seen the news that morning. Others didn't need to. They knew his face. They knew what he'd done. The rage had been simmering for months. Now it boiled. Ramirez turned a corner, saw a red Ford Mustang, and tried the door. Locked. He kept running. Another turn, another locked car. He tried a third. A man shouted. A crowd formed. They were gaining. He jumped into a driveway and yanked at a car door. This time, it opened. He scrambled inside, trying to hotwire it, but someone slammed the door shut behind him. A fist came through the open window. He tried to run again, but a metal pipe cracked against the side of his head. Blood splattered the concrete. Another man tackled his legs. Ramirez kicked, clawed. But then, another hit. A boot to his ribs, a knee to his face. Someone stomped on his hand.
Ah! It's me!
But no one cared. The man who had snuck silently through sleeping homes, stabbing, beating, violating, was now curled on the street, arms over his face, blood running into the gutter. His dark shirt was soaked crimson. His teeth were chipped. The Night Stalker was broken. By the time the police arrived, he was barely conscious. The officers had to push through the angry crowd to reach him. Some still tried to land punches as they dragged him to the car. Richard Ramirez was in custody, and Los Angeles exhaled. At the station, he refused to speak. No confessions, no panic, only silence. He smiled when they took his fingerprints. He smirked when they read the charges. But the police weren't smiling. Neither were the families. Over 14 confirmed murders, dozens of attempted murders, assaults, and crimes too grotesque to name. The trial would become one of the most expensive and bizarre in California history. Over 100 witnesses, 1,600 pieces of evidence, 4 years of delays. Ramirez constantly disrupted court with laughter, obscenities, and satanic gestures. He carved a pentagram into his hand and held it up to the jury. "Hail, Satan," he whispered. Every time a surviving victim testified, Ramirez stared without blinking. When family members cried, he smirked. He flirted with female reporters. One even wrote him love letters. Another would become his wife. In 1991, the verdict came down. 19 death sentences, one for every life the jury could prove he stole. The judge didn't mince words. "Your deeds exhibit cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding." Ramirez barely reacted. "No big deal," he said. "Death always comes with the territory. See you in Disneyland." He was sent to San Quentin prison, where he spent the next 2 decades on death row, still believing he would be reincarnated, still claiming Satan protected him. He married a woman named Doreen in 1996, who said she believed in his innocence. She told the press, "He's not the monster the media painted. He's misunderstood." But the facts remained. 14 dead, dozens of survivors with shattered bodies and haunted minds. Hundreds of families whose nights were never peaceful again. In the end, Richard Ramirez didn't face the gas chamber. He died in 2013 from complications related to B-cell lymphoma, alone in a prison hospital room. A killer, a coward, a cult of one, who burned in silence. He was 53. The people never forgot. The man who once inspired curfews, locked windows and sleepless nights, had been unmasked, beaten, and erased. And yet, in the stillness of the city, when the wind howls through open alleyways, some still check the shadows, just in case. Because evil doesn't always die in the headlines. Sometimes, it just waits. They caught him. The Night Stalker was in chains. But the terror never truly left. The survivors said it was quiet for a while. Streets felt safer. Families started sleeping again. But inside, the fear had already made a home. One woman who escaped Ramirez's attack said she hasn't slept in the dark since. Another moved across the country, changed her name. But the dreams still followed. One survivor recounted a moment burned into her soul. "I heard breathing, right by my ear, but I didn't move. I just laid there. He stood over me, and then he walked away." They never came back from that night. Not really. Mothers still wake up screaming. Children who are now adults still check the locks twice. Some never entered a relationship again. Some never spoke publicly. Silence became survival. The victims' families live with a different weight. Some lost daughters, others sons, parents. Whole generations ended in a single scream. But beyond grief was anger. Because for years it felt like the system had failed them. They asked, how did he move for so long? Why weren't the crimes connected earlier? Why did it take blood on every street to get attention? One father said, "We didn't just lose her, we lost faith in everything else, too." For law enforcement, the Ramirez case became a lesson carved in blood. Detectives Carrillo and Salerno became heroes, but they also carried guilt. Guilt for the victims they couldn't save, for the nights they followed the wrong lead. For every minute the Night Stalker remained free. After the trial, the LAPD launched reforms, improved interdepartmental tracking, better survivor support systems, night patrol reinforcements in vulnerable areas. But policies on paper couldn't erase the trauma that hung in the hallways. A young rookie, newly assigned to homicide, once said, "You walk past the board of open cases and see his name there, Ramirez. You remind yourself, monsters are real, and they don't always hide in forests." But the world outside didn't stay quiet either. The media gave Ramirez a crown, not of justice, but of infamy. Tabloids printed his picture like a movie star. TV anchors replayed his Hail Satan courtroom moment with glee. Merchandise appeared, t-shirts, posters, books. Some called him a symbol of pure evil. Others, disturbingly, turned him into a sex symbol. He received fan mail in prison, love letters, And in 1996, he got married behind bars. Her name was Doreen Leoy, a magazine editor. She claimed he was misunderstood, that he wasn't the monster they said. The same year, one survivor saw Ramirez on TV and collapsed from a panic attack. Evil, once caught, had found a new way to live. In screens, in culture, in fascination. While his face spread across magazines, another family sat in silence. The Ramirezes. Richard's brothers and sisters avoided interviews. His parents shut their doors to media. One distant cousin gave a single quote to a reporter. "We don't speak his name." He left it behind anyway. For them, every news article was another wound. Every image, another reminder that while the world saw a demon, they once held him as a child. The boy who got nosebleeds, the kid who watched horror movies alone, the teen who stopped talking after his cousin Miguel came back from war. Some said they should have known. But how do you predict a child will one day kneel before a murdered body and whisper to Satan? The fear Ramirez created never truly died. Apartment buildings where he struck had trouble finding tenants. Some families moved out of LA entirely. Kids who grew up during that summer remembered it as the year no one slept. A retired dispatcher said she still dreams of the 911 calls. Another officer said, "I've seen bodies before." But with him, it wasn't just murder. It was ritual. In one of the final interviews for this case, a woman sat in her small, quiet kitchen. She had survived Richard Ramirez. Her face was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she spoke. "I lock every door, every window. I keep a baseball bat under the bed. I still sleep with the lights on." She looked at the interviewer and said quietly, "You know, they say he's dead, but every time I walk down a hallway at night, I feel like he's still there." A pause. She blinked back a tear. "I know he's gone, but in here," she placed a hand to her chest, "he never left." Chapter 2. He simply left an impact on you. Like, comment, and subscribe. True crime deserves to be told with care, not forgotten in silence.